You just purchased your brand new drone and you take it out to fly, and then you realize that you fly too high to get any kind of details worth showcasing, and the time of the day you decided to go fly it just does not allow for any details. And yet you've seen all these really sick videos online of all these different drone shots being done and how like they make it super simple and super easy to get, but yet somehow every time you take the drone out it ends up being just kind of garbage and something that's just not usable. In this video we're going to talk about 3 shots that will almost guarantee you perfect results if you follow these guidelines when you get out there for the first time. So hopefully this could be some kind of a guide that may help you in figuring out your style, your unique way. But these are 3 shots that I definitely recommend trying out, especially as you get started in your drone flying journey. The first one we're going to call the side reveal. This one essentially will happen around 20 to 50 feet. You can adjust that based where it is you're flying, and you typically would have like some kind of object, could be whatever you want, in the way, and it's in the name. So you basically fly to the side very slowly in order to give the viewer the detail and the anticipation of what's behind it, but the subject that you want to be focusing on is on the other side of that subject. So oftentimes for me where I live, I'm doing things like there's buildings or trees, and I want to showcase how the sun is hitting a certain valley or a mountain or even the sunrise or sunset. But the subject that you're going for is typically behind that object that you're going to be sliding over to the left or the right to eventually reveal. I typically use this kind of maneuver in order to showcase the context of where I'm flying or to really highlight a specific subject. Now in this one it's very important to fly slowly. So if you are flying with a DJI drone, you've got the cinematic, normal, and sport. I always keep it on the cinematic or normal, depending on how you have your flight preferences set. But you don't want to be flying more than 5, 10, 15 miles per hour. Anything like beyond 15 and above, I think you might be kind of rushing it too much. But this is one of those maneuvers you want to take it slowly in order to build anticipation and showcase the subject that is going to be right behind that building or tree or whatever object you're flying past. The next one, we're calling it the minimal horizon shot. Now this one is a little bit of an interesting take, because a lot of times what you'd often see is if you're trying to capture sunrise or sunset, you're going to be angling the horizon just below the middle of the screen. The real estate on screen is going to be made up mostly of like the clouds and the patterns and the sky, and then less so of the ground. In this one you're actually reversing it. You're actually doing minimal, it's in the name as well in this one, but in this one you're minimally showing the horizon and most of is the ground. But the only reason you're showing the horizon where the sunset or the sunrise may be is to allow some light leak into there. I'm not the biggest fan of shooting sunrises or sunsets. I just think that's a little cliche and everybody's doing it. So I tried finding ways to point the camera in other ways that maybe drone users are not doing it, and this is one way that I found. Now I like this kind of maneuver whenever there's an interesting pattern to the ground or the earth wherever you're flying. This is a perfect one if you like to fly 200-300 feet in the air or just some crazy heights. And now this one also only works, in my opinion, during sunrise or sunset when there's shadows being cast. When the sun is really directly above you, it's not really going to give a lot of the texture that you might want. But this one, so this maneuver I'm really using on a case-by-case basis and very sporadically, again, just to show off detail on the ground during certain times of the day where shadows are being cast, but allowing a little bit of the horizon coming up on like the top third of the screen, only to allow a little bit of light leak, which allows a lot more dynamic and texture to that image. This sometimes really is kind of like the only time I'm really flying high, when I'm trying to get a shot like this, and it's hovering around like the 400 feet mark. All right, so the next one is the low horizon punch-in. This one you may have to fly at your own risk. Obviously all of these are at your own risk, but this one you run the risk of potentially crashing the drone. On this one you are hovering about 5 to 10 feet off the ground. And the reason being is just you're putting emphasis on movement, showcasing the ground moving fast underneath the drone. You don't really have to be flying too fast for this one. You can get really good shots on this one when you're flying maybe 10, 15. And essentially the drone is moving forward 5 to 10 feet off the ground. You've got a subject over on, you're following the rule of thirds on the left or right third quadrant, just so that your viewer, it's got some leading lines and your viewer has a little bit more dynamic viewership of the screen. But you've got a couple of different elements. So the drone is moving forward. You've got the fast pace of the ground moving underneath, and then you've got the subject off on your left or your right. This one is a little bit more dynamic. You have to definitely practice this one a little bit just to make sure that you're doing multiple things all at once. Try not to hit the ground below you, but then also capturing the subject in view. Now on this one too, this is one of my favorite ones. You don't always have to go forward. You can often also go to the right as well, but the point is you're showing movement underneath. Found that that's appealing to the eyes and just something that adds a different layer of texture for viewership. So a couple of thoughts just to make these 3 moves just a whole lot better. I typically only ever fly during sunrise or sunset, sometimes during blue hour, and then when there's heavy overcast or fog. I'm never flying during the daytime. I know some people do. For me, for like the cinematic feel, I want the shadows, I want the colors, I want different pops of just different colors and shadows, and you find that only during those time frames. So you do have to be very specific. You do have to plan out your shots if you know you're gonna be flying at those times of the day. You only have a limited amount of time. So you do have to just be mindful of that. Like a lot of these shots that I just described are often best when there's overcast of shadows and the colors are being exaggerated and there's just more detail within the shadows throughout the day. It's not to say this can't work in the middle of the day, but because of the harsh lighting conditions that you typically run into when the sun is, at the top of the sky, you do have to kind of bring in a couple of different elements to offset that. So obviously ND filters, kind of like shades for your drone camera, that's gonna offset that a little bit and bring in a little bit more detail in the shadows. So that way it gives you the texture, gives you the layers, and you can appreciate all the little elements as you bring them into frame. If you don't have access to ND filters, maybe when you're starting off trying to figure out what you're trying to buy, or maybe you're sticking to a budget, try and fly in shaded areas. So that is obviously going to work depending on where you live. If you live on the coast, there's not a whole lot of tree covers. Depending on what type of coast, that may be a little difficult. For me, I have found, because I do live in very mountainous areas, I can often fly with the shade of a lot of trees or a mountain, or within a valley where there's just a lot of huge formations just kind of covering everything up for me. So that has been one way I can work around it. So if you can't do ND filters, try and look for shaded areas, or for areas where maybe the light is going to get scattered throughout. If light leaks through trees or other objects in midday, that's fine, because now you have a little bit more texture there, and now you can kind of mix and match, and there's a little bit more diversity for the eye when looking at that, rather than just harsh sunlight and not a whole lot of details because of the sunlight. If you're flying in an area where you're not all too excited about the subjects that you're trying to capture, maybe you just don't have that many subjects to capture that are interesting to you, the sunset and sunrise are always a constant where you live. So you may want to try and focus or practice on that. Now, that's obviously going to work best sunrise or sunset. A lot of these shots will allow for that, because you don't always have to be aiming the drone at the sun. And I know that's a lot of times what you see online, but like I mentioned in one of my earlier shots, the minimal horizon shot, go back to that one, play around with those rules a little bit. I'll throw on screen here that there's a lot of times where you can capture different, what may seem boring elements of landscape, but if you play it right and you angle the camera at a certain angle at a certain time of the day, and this is where it takes practice, you can actually allow the sunlight to act as a character. Again, if you want to point it at the sun, try and angle it in different areas of the frame, instead of just dead center and always doing the same punch in, punch out, or side swipe. But you just have to get creative with that, and depending on the kind of drone you have, you can use a 70mm, 24mm. On the Air 3, you get those two options. If you have something like a Mini 4 Pro and you're only stuck to one focal length, then that's where you may just have to get a little bit creative. But even with just a 70, if there's often times where I'm in an area where there's just like a boring landscape, but I kind of want to fly and maybe the sun looks pretty and that's the only thing I've got, well then I'm often angling that in a very specific section of the frame and not just the front, to make it look like an element, but it's not the element to focus on. It's just contributing to the image, which actually kind of leads me to the next point, and it's obvious, like, don't aim it at the sun. I mean, you can find stock footage everywhere of people aiming their camera drones at the sun, and it's the same old image you're gonna find everywhere. Sure, in the beginning you want to practice, you want to get used to that, but eventually you want to start separating yourself and kind of developing your own style. So try and look at, if everybody is aiming the camera at a certain direction or at a certain subject, try and flip it on its head by making that a player in the image and not exactly the subject. And so, like I've been describing this whole time, I don't really like making the sun the subject, but I like using elements of it to add layers to that. And so try not to aim the camera at the sun, but use the sun's elements to enhance whatever you're pointing the camera at. And then the last piece that I would talk about, there's an app out there called Magic Hour app that I keep on my phone. Essentially, it's gonna tell you when sunrise and sunset's happening, when magic hour, which is that like in the beginning and the end of the day are gonna happen, so you can better plan your schedule. I like to have this app because it'll tell you like you've got 4 hours left, you got 3 hours left till this time frame, so I can kind of know, okay, I gotta start getting ready, or I gotta get ready to head out there. And then it's also gonna tell you when it's crossing the horizon, which is kind of helpful because you'll get that 30 minutes before it crosses the horizon, which is sometimes the better part of sunrise or sunset. And then even 30 minutes afterwards when you start crossing into blue hour, totally different shots there, different looks, but it just helps you plan a little bit more whenever you're trying to get out there, even if it's like a last minute shot or if you're trying to do something a couple days in advance. I believe there's a paid feature on there which gives you a little bit more information, but in my opinion, the free version has definitely helped out a lot. As a parting thought, I will say this, all of this is just to say you are responsible for what ends up on your frame. Sure, you can go out and chase the kinds of views that you're seeing all over the place and just kind of repeat the same old boring stock footage that everybody's doing. But at the end of the day, if you are responsible for your frame, you're responsible for making it interesting. You're responsible for putting whatever you want on there, and the outcome is your decision. I offer this just because when I was starting off, I was getting frustrated that all my shots were starting to look like everybody else's, and it was actually boring me because I was just rinsing and repeating what everybody else was doing. And so this is a fun little way of just bringing in a different element or different elements to give you a different edge on using your drone, instead of falling into the same temptation of taking your drone 400 or 500 feet in the air and getting the same kind of shot that everybody does of the sunset or sunrise and just not sticking out. And plus it's just not fun. I think I have a saying right here, probably can't see it, but yeah, you can't see it, but it says crash if you have to. Drone equipment is so good these days that even a $200 or $300 drone from DJI produces great results. Buy what you can afford to replace. Buy what you can afford to buy a second time, because a lot of the more interesting and intricate shots I have noticed, I've had to come really close to crashing my drone, and that's why I just fully adopted that saying here, crash if you have to. If you have to get that shot, get close to that edge and get that shot. Some of my favorite shots have come from that mentality. It does not mean go off and be reckless with your drone and go off and just do crazy things and just destroy it, but use your gear. And if it breaks, if you lose it, if it gets damaged, you bought something that is still going to produce great results, because everything's producing great results these days. The technology is that good, but you bought something that you can afford to buy again, working within your means. So that's it.